everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today we dive into the gameplay for Anastyr from Mythic Games, which is landing on Kickstarter for April 19th. The aim of this Kickstarter Preview Series is to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not this game is for you. Now, if you want to see all the components that came as part of the prototype, I've got an unboxing for that, as well as a setup video that'll help you understand everything you're seeing here on screen. I'll put a link to both of those, the entire playlist, in the top right hand corner, so you can go check those out first and then come back here and check out the gameplay. Now, there's a couple things we need to go through before we begin our very first round, one of which is around the quest and adventure we're about to go on. It's adventure number 1 within this prototype, and everything here is subject to change. The adventure is called First Blood, and we're going to begin with quest number 1 called Ambush. We're going to go over that in a second. We're also going to talk about the solo mode, and we're going to talk about win and loss conditions. So let's get started. To the east of your position, you spot the telltale round tents used by the White Eagle nomads. If you can reach them, maybe you can learn more about the Nogai if it's not already too late. Now, you'll notice at the very bottom of this quest card, it says primary objective is to head east. We're going to begin on the west side of the board, moving to the east and then scrolling onwards. This game is a side scroller, so there's going to be lots of surprises as you traverse through the game. Now, this first one is likely an easier objective, as we just simply need to get to the other side of the game board. Things are going to rapidly change as we go through quest 1, 2, and 3, progressing through them to complete the adventure First Blood. We begin by placing the heroes we're controlling in solo mode. I'm controlling 2 heroes. We have Brid and Pyra. Both of them can be placed in any of the positions from top to bottom on the left-hand side of the game board. Our heroes have now entered the fray. You'll see we also have a creature out in the wild. It's a Hayati. That is something we can actually attempt to try and tame and mount to our advantage to use against the enemies. We can also just leave it alone. We don't have to try and tame it. Also, you'll see just a little bit of the tips of some of the hunters there in the bottom right-hand corner coming around the corner for us. There's many more beyond this coming from the east side of the game board. And we also have one hero ready to go in reserve in case one of the active heroes is KO'd. The trackers harass you relentlessly, skillfully driving you into the clutches of the Kazul warriors. You notice they are all taking orders from one man, who, brandishing a whip and a staff, is coordinating the hunt and guiding the trackers like a shepherd controlling his dogs. You'll notice on the right-hand side of this quest, there's a secondary objective, and that objective is to eliminate the individual you just saw on screen. That's right, if we can take down the hunter, then as it states below, the hero who eliminates this individual, which is known as a specialist, and you know this because the skull icon has a little bit of a border over top of it versus a regular skull icon, which is just for regular enemies. There's also a numerical value in there that lets you know the level too. So really, this is a level 1 specialist, and it's called a hunter. If we take this down, the hero who does becomes the leader. Now let's turn our attention to the rule tweaks when playing the solo mode of Anastyr. Now, you already know one of them, and that is that as a solo player, you're going to be controlling 2 active heroes at a given time. You have one in reserve in this case with this adventure, and we have Brid and Pyra. Now, both of them come with their own technique decks that are these decks just off to the side of the camera. These are comprised half of cards that are similar between the decks. In other words, there's not much of a difference. And then the other half of the cards are very specific to the character and class that deck actually corresponds to. So that's what gives the uniqueness to each of the decks, and it's worth mentioning as you progress through a campaign, these decks can change as well. Now, when playing solo, you're going to be controlling one hand of cards across both heroes. So when you begin your very first round of play, you're going to draw 3 cards from Brid, 3 cards from Pyra, or whichever heroes you've chosen to control, and that's going to make up the 6 cards that's going to start your game. Now, I'm not going to go too heavy into the specifics of how you can use these cards because there's actually a number of different ways, but when you're playing solo, it's worth mentioning you're going to have all 6 of these cards in your hand at the same time. You cannot use the body or the main technique that's in the center of the card for the other hero. In other words, I can't use a card that is obviously a Pyra card, as you can see the art on the right-hand side, for Brid, but there are ways within the game where you can use these cards in a different different fashion to bolster and help out your allies and heroes. And I'll talk about that when we actually see it in gameplay, but wanted to mention the fact that that is a constraint, because what happens is after the first round of play, where you have 6 cards in hand with an even 3 and 3 from each hero, when you go into your second round, it may not be like that. And it really hinges on your strategy and what you're trying to accomplish. So let's say within round number 1, you went ahead and activated Brid when the activation card for Brid came along in the initiative track, and you spent or used 2 of the cards, leaving just 1 behind. And for Pyrite, you used 2 as well. So now you have just 2 cards in hand, 1 for each. Well, when you go to the preparation phase at the very beginning of the next round, the second round, this is where things get interesting. You are allowed at this point to draw cards up from either of the 2 decks, and it doesn't have to be equal. So you can strategically choose to draw cards from one character more so than another if you're gunning for a particular strategy going on the game board, right? You're going to have that opportunity, which makes things really interesting. Now, additionally, on top of this, there are some nasty things that can happen to you during gameplay that can impact the ability to do that. Characters, when they go through gameplay, could get a severe injury card. Normally, these cards would go into your hand, and they do have effects that are not so great. When you're playing in solo mode, how these severe injury cards can affect your hand management is that it reduces your hand limit by 1 card overall. So out of the 6 cards you're normally allowed to start a round with, you'd be reduced down to 5 overall because of a serious injury card. But also, when these serious injury cards are taken, they're applied to just one of the heroes, not in their hand, but just beside their character dashboard. So for instance, if Brid had gotten this particular one here, then it would be over here next to her game board. There is an ability for her to try and heal that away, but there's other impacts from that beyond just reducing your overall hand limit. It also stops you from drawing no more than 2 technique cards from that impacted hero. So when that preparation phase comes around again and you're looking at drawing cards up, you now are unable to draw up as many as you might have liked because that hero is hurt. Again, the heal action is there to try to get rid of these cards. The big difference to remember in solo play is you're managing both piles of cards inside of one hand, and also the fact that your severe injury cards will not be in your hand, but will actually be on the table, and they'll still have a nasty effect that's going to impact it throughout the game. The last thing that's worth mentioning around the solo mode is anywhere you see the term ally, it actually refers to a hero other than the active one when you're playing solo. Pretty straightforward. Beyond those, that is really what sums up the differences with the solo mode versus playing with each individual around a table controlling one hero. So now let's shift over and talk about how players win the game. When the words adventure completed are revealed upon flipping a quest card to its quest completed side, they can then read the adventure's epilogue section. So at that point, the heroes have succeeded at the adventure. Now the players lose the game if either of the following 2 conditions are met. A hero is eliminated while there are no more heroes in the supply. So again, that's the reason why we do have 1 other hero in the supply. So we can't afford to lose 1. But then as soon as we lose the second hero and there's no more heroes to replenish, that is going to be the end of our game. The other way we can lose is the event deck empties out completely at the end of a game round. The event deck is the second deck from the top. It has 7 cards inside of it, as it mentioned on the adventure sheet for First Blood, and it essentially acts as a timer. If you're wondering when the event deck is triggered, up near the initiative track, you'll see a card dead center in the middle at this point in time. It's labeled the Jade C, and when the activation marker lands on that card, we're going to flip an event card over, discard it, but of course we're going to reveal and resolve any effects on it. So those event cards are not only going to be a timer, but also going to throw curveballs at you as you play through the game. All right, I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some gameplay, so let's go ahead and begin our very first round of play. We've already covered the first thing you do during the round, which is the preparation phase, where you deal with your hand of cards, and you'll see how this works out when we get into round 2. So now let's move to the initiative phase. The initiative phase is pretty straightforward. There's one major thing you need to do, and that could be a chaos check, which is performed, and then the player with the leader token, if anyone has the leader token, can try and destabilize the enemy. So essentially, if a chaos check is performed, which we'll likely see later down the line, it essentially can change up the entire row here in terms of who's activating in what order. The hero token usage by a particular hero can allow that hero to switch places with something else in the row, which really can strategically change up the upcoming round. Now, for the first round of play, we skip right past this. The activation phase is straightforward as well. We basically take the activation token and we place it on the next card in line in the initiative row here, and we're going to be activating Brid. The first thing you'll do on a hero activation is if you happen to be on top of a mount, you need to do a check to see whether or not you will continue to tame the beast that you have mounted. Now, we don't have, and we're not currently on a mount, so we'll skip right past that and we can get into the actions. When playing the solo mode, you're going to have 3 actions that you can take per hero. Some actions are going to take away from that allotment of 3, and other ones are considered free actions. Basic actions are the ones that actually take away from the 3 allotment that you have. And those types of actions can be things like preparing a combo, performing a technique, maneuver, focus, heal, interact, taming a creature, or throwing an enemy. The free actions contain things like triggering a combo, unleashing your fury, using a mount, or using loot. I'm going to have Brid take the first action. It's going to be a maneuver action, and when you do this, you can do something like move and attack, attack then move. You can just move, you can just attack, or you can literally do nothing if you want to just burn the action. You have a choice there in terms of how you do that. So for me personally, I want to get moving. My character's in the bottom left-hand corner of the board, and we have a hunter there just 2 spaces away. I'm going to run towards that individual using my movement speed of 2, which will get me right in there. So Brid charges full force into the same space as a tracker. It's worth mentioning in each space, you can have a maximum of 6 in terms of the unit capacity. How do you know how much each unit goes against that capacity? Well, right there on the character board, you'll see a 1 on the furthest right stat that lets you know that our hero counts for 1. If my hero happened to be on a mount, it's going to go up to 2. I don't have anything beyond that total in this prototype, but who knows, maybe in the final version, you can have even more than that. But it definitely matters for how many individuals can be in the same space. If you want to know how much a particular unit takes up in terms of the enemies, take a look at the reference cards to the side of the board. They have the exact same icon on it. In this case, for the tracker, it's also 1. So in this space, 2 units currently reside. We could have another 4 on-foot units in here as well. Let's finish off our first maneuver action by doing an attack, because I'm in the same space as an enemy and I definitely want to take it out. So how much damage do I need to do? Well, taking a look at the reference card for the tracker, there's a shield icon on it with a 1. So I basically have to land at least 1 single hit. Now, if there was more trackers inside of the space, when I make this attack roll, you can disperse the damage you get off of the attack roll across multiple enemies in there. There is no such thing as tracking damage in terms of picking away at the enemies in this game. You have to land their defensive value or you don't kill them. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and roll 2 dice. I'm pretty happy with this. I was just looking for a 1 in this case. If you want to know what's on all sides, we basically have a hit on one side here, 2 on this side, 1, 1. This is a grab, which we'll talk about later on, and this is a straight up miss. So I feel pretty good about this out of the gates. There's other ways to boost this roll as well, but for now, I'm not going to go over those. We'll keep it simple. We'll go ahead and roll these off, and I got myself a grab and a hit. I have no reason to grab, but maybe I actually do. I guarantee can kill it right now, though. I've decided that the hit that I got here is exactly what I want. We're going to go ahead and kill that tracker. Now, I could have done the grab. You'll likely see me use this later on, so just be aware of the fact that when you roll something like this, you do have a choice. Now, just so everybody can see, the tracker card's in the top left there, and you'll notice on the specialist, which is also a level 1, to the right of it, in the top right-hand corner, there is a loot card. So certain enemies, when you kill them off, will give you loot. The specialist does, but I did not kill the specialist, I killed the tracker, so nothing gained here beyond just helping to clean up the board. Now you're also probably wondering, well, what is this thing right here? It's a mass grave, and actually the heroes really don't like seeing mass graves in this situation based on the narrative. And whenever they end their turn in a space with a mass grave, they actually get a boost to their fury. You're probably wondering what fury is. That's tracked on the right hand side of the character board and can lead to a very powerful fury ability that can be triggered later on. So just to show you visually, this is the Fury track on the right-hand side. There are multiple ways to gain Fury. You'll see this happen as I go through gameplay, but this mass grave and being in this space at the end of a turn is one of them. So if I chose to end my turn here, it would go up by 1. I'm not done yet. But once this thing reaches the very top of the track, I can then essentially cash it in order to make available my Fury ability, which I can then use at an opportune time to do some pretty devastating stuff. For my second action, I have to remember the fact that there is a constraint around how many times I can do the same action, and that is just 1. So basically, even though I listed off a number of different things I can do as a basic action, maneuvering is one of them, and I just did it, so I can't do it again. In other words, I can't just go ahead and move and attack again, or attack and then move, or just one or the other. At this point, I've already done that on my turn. I'll have to wait till my next activation in the next game round to be able to do that again. So I have to make use of other actions at this point. And that's honestly a-okay because the meat and strategy of the game, the most fun aspect of the game, comes from the card play itself. The cards are where you're going to be trying to build out your strategy, whether you're using them for the technique that's listed right on the body of the card, whether you're preparing a combo simply to make use of the bottom portion of the card in order to combo together symbols that are placed along the row left to right in order to then trigger and make use of some pretty powerful combos that way, or even just using them to boost up dice rolls along the way. There's a number of different ways to use these cards that are going to help you out. So that maneuver action, even though it sounded pretty good to be able to move and attack, you've got a lot more interesting things going on across your dashboard and your cards that you can make use of. So taking a look at the 3 cards I have for Brid here, this one, if I perform a technique, I'd be using it for the body here. It says movement, so I'd be able to move my allotment of 2, but I gain the ability of speed. And what speed lets you do is it lets you move diagonally more than once. Now, when you do a regular move, if you ever choose to move diagonal, you can only make 1 diagonal move during your movement action normally. But in this case, it's allowing you to use the ability speed, which basically says, go ahead and use diagonal movement as much as you want, allowing you to really rip across the map quite quickly in a diagonal fashion. I don't really need to do that right now. I've got enough stuff going on around me, so we'll skip past that. This one here says range 2. Pyra targets up to 2 heroes. If only 1 hero is targeted, they move. If 2 heroes are targeted, they move again. So again, it's a lot of movement there with those cards. Not something I necessarily need right away. Again, you'll see the green icon at the bottom and up in the top left-hand corners lets you know this one focuses more on the art side of the equation versus the defensive in blue or the triangle in red. So we don't have any red yet, and that's probably what we really want at the moment, but we can build towards that. On this card right here, it says Brid can move to the targeted ally. If Brid is near the ally, she defends instead of the ally. Now, the reason that this is an interesting card is it has this icon right here with an arrow pointing backwards. It's letting you know that this can be used before a defensive roll by an ally. This is where you can kind of throw a card in instantly to kind of come over and help, essentially. A very good card to have if your other hero is in big trouble. In the top right-hand corner, we have a special ability. It says whenever Brid boosts a defensive roll, she may use any type of boost bonus. So normally, if you're going to choose to boost yourself or another ally or hero, you're going to go ahead and discard one of your cards for the top right action here, which is a +1, which is an additional die. What this ability is allowing you to do is you don't have to have the defensive +1. You can literally use any type. So it really opens up all of your cards to be able to be used in a defensive fashion, which makes a lot of sense for this tank. So for my second action, I'm actually going to go ahead and prepare a combo, and this is exactly what it looks like. You'll place the card that you want to use underneath the dashboard, ignoring everything else on the card except for the symbol that's at the bottom as it begins to build out a combo of your choosing. Now, I'm very lucky with Brid because all of them start with a square. That's not normally the case on every single character, but she is a very defensive character as a tank, so it makes thematic sense that most of her start with a square, and that's usually the makeup of her deck as well. You'll also see there's a Fury icon there, so when you prepare a combo, you also get to bump up your Fury. So just like that, our second basic action has now been completed, and let's move to our third and final one. Next, I'm going to perform a technique, and when I do this, I take a look at the body of text here and resolve it. Now, it's worth mentioning that when you resolve this, you have to resolve everything that's on it, even if it's got some nasty effects to you. However, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to actually do everything on the card in terms of it being a good thing. So in this case, this would allow me to check range 2 away from my character to see if I can target any other heroes. If I can essentially get a really nice boost to movement, but I really don't need that right now, so there's no negatives to this, so I'm really just going to use the technique to use the technique. And also, when you do that, you can then tuck the card under your dashboard in the same way that I did when I performed a combo, or I should say I prepared a combo, and this will allow me, which is part of my strategy, to be able to unlock the ironclad defense, which I will probably need, seeing as I've moved up into a little bit more dangerous territory. Now, it's worth mentioning that after you perform a technique, in other words, for its body of text, you don't have to actually slot it under your dashboard. You can literally choose to just straight up discard it. So you're not like stuck if you happen to use one that's going to mess up a sequence you're trying to build in order to unlock a future combo. In this case, it worked out for me. I've got myself the ironclad defense ready to go when I need to use it, and this is something that will be able to be triggered after a defensive roll by Brid. And Brid ended up staying in the same space as a mass grave, so her fury is increasing because she's seen this and is still next to it. She's now up to a fury total of 2, working her way up to eventually be able to unlock her fury card. Next activation is going to be for all level 1 enemies. This includes the Specialist first, which is the skull on the left-hand side, which does have that arc or border around the top, and then all the level 1 minions are going to go as well. Here's a look at both level 1 enemies that are going to activate based on the card, and we have the trackers, the regular ones, and then the Specialist Hunter. The Specialist Hunter goes first. Take a look at the keywords in the middle of the card. Make sure you know what they are before you activate them to ensure you're activating those abilities at the right time. Some of them will have to do with combat, some will be during movement, and some of them are going to be laid out strictly right on the card itself. You'll see at the bottom of the Hunter, it mentions that if the Hunter is still in play, basically when you move into the spawn phase, you're going to have more trackers coming into play so long as the Hunter is still alive. So something to focus on, maybe taking this thing down sooner rather than later, even though it's a secondary objective, to avoid extra spawns happening. So activating the Hunter, it has 1 movement. It's going to move first towards the closest hero. So that is easily going to be Brid at this point, being that Brid made that big move at the bottom portion of the board. So what does an enemy do in terms of movement? Well, it will always try to diagonally move first to get into the row that the actual hero's in, to then move forward towards the hero. So it's going to move diagonal in this case. Now, you'll also likely notice on the game board that not all of the areas are exactly the same. Some of them are squared, some of them are rounded, and others don't have any kind of square or rounded edges at all. So a good example of that would be these giant rocks right here. Basically rocks that you can't walk into, and it also blocks ranged attacks as well. Now, this thing is just going to go ahead and move diagonally, so A-OK there. It's moving into a spot that has a white rectangled border, and that means that it's just a regular terrain with no effect. If you happen to see one that has a curved white border, then that means it's difficult terrain, and at that point it's going to make you stop your movement when you move into it. During an enemy activation, you're not only moving, but you're also trying to attack. Now, the Hunter can't attack anything because nothing is within range 1 of it, so we get to skip past that, and we move to the trackers. Now, there's a whole bunch of trackers all over the board, so which ones do you activate and in which order? Well, you start at the very top northwest point on the map, and you're going to move down the row of spaces, and then go back up to the top and down the row, back up to the top, down the row, and that's the order in which you're going to activate enemies when you have multiple. So the first tracker that's going to activate will be this one here, followed by this one, then this one, then this one, and then we'll go to the far top right corner and then the bottom right hand corner. Now, what makes the trackers nasty is the fact that they do have 3 movements, so they really can gain some ground quite quickly. So the first tracker to activate is going to be this one here. It is 1, 2, 3 spaces away, or 1, 2, 3 spaces away. So when there isn't a hero that is closer out of the options present, the next thing that the enemy is going to do is look for the one that has a leader token. In my case, neither character has hero has the leader token. So then it goes to the next individual to activate in the initiative row, which is going to be Pyra. So that is where the tracker is headed. Next one to activate is right here. Pretty obvious decision there as the closest hero. And then we continue down the columns of the game board, going from left to right. So the next one to activate will be right here. And we again take a look and go 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2. So it's going to be heading over to Brid. At this point, I'm going to continue doing the rest of the movement for all the 3 remaining trackers. We're now done all the movement. We can now move into the attacks for the trackers. The trackers are now in place and they're ready to attack, so which hero gets attacked first? Well, it's the exact same way you determine which of the enemies activates. So you're going to take a look at the top left-hand corner of the game board and work your way down the column and then back up to the top of the next column and back down again, and you'll follow that through. So it is definitely going to be Pyra first, so it's just going to be 1 tracker after Pyra. Taking a look at the tracker card, you'll see the attack value is 1, so that's what kind of a hit is coming towards Pyra, so we need to defend against it by rolling dice. Also worth mentioning, the Pack 1 ability does not come into play, does not give an additional die because there is only 1 lone tracker. So Pyra's basic defense is 2, and you can take a look at your cards to see whether you can bolster that in any way, shape, or form. I could go ahead and actually discard this entire card for a +1 on a defensive roll, or I could do this, which says before a defensive roll for Pyra, I can +2, basically adding 2 to my roll, making it 4. That would kind of be a little bit more defense than I necessarily need right now, so I'll probably just stick with the 2 base dice I already have. Let's see whether we get the successes we need in order to avoid the damage. Yes, we got the 1, so it's blocked. Nothing comes through. I can't say the same for poor Brid because Brid's got 3. That's right, 3 trackers on her, and the pack thing is going to come into play for this. So it's going to be 1 for each of these trackers plus an additional 1, so 4 damage is coming to Brid. We have to roll for defense. Thank goodness she has a high defensive value out of the gate, so she's rolling 4 dice, which is good, but we are rolling against a lot of hits. So the other thing that's nice is in her turn, being that it activated prior to this swarming of the enemies, I was able to prepare a combo here that I could actually use called Ironclad Defense. Now I would do this after the defensive roll, so I'd roll my 4 dice, see how I do, and then if I choose to go ahead and discard these cards for the combo, I can then treat any grabs that I get as a success, and then for each grab I get, I also get to stun an enemy nearby, so that could be really handy. So let's go ahead and make this roll and see. We might get lucky right out of the gates and just be able to negate all the damage, or we might really need that Ironclad Defense. Let's see how it goes. Hey, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. We didn't get anything around grabbing those, so because of that, I'm not going to bother triggering this right now. We'll save it for another day. The one thing to mention as well is both the heroes have a reroll token. If you choose to use it, you're going to flip it over. You have to reroll all of your dice if you choose to do so, and there are ways to bring that back as well as an action later on your turn. So for now, we're just going to take 1 hit, dropping us down to 6. The marker now moves on the track to activate the Jade Sea. So this is going to be an event card pull. The event card that we pulled is called Party Time. It says all heroes in or adjacent to one of the mass graves space may prepare a combo. That's a pretty handy thing. So we just got to check to see whether we have any cards we want to prepare. And then down below it shows a couple icons, and this relates to the creatures in the game and also Sealify. And those can be found in the top right hand corner. You'll find 3 of them in a row. They're the slender models, and they are in order from common, uncommon, uncommon to rare. There is a spawn card which will come through at some point, which may spawn one of these individuals onto the game board. And when it does so, it's something a little different than a creature like the Hayati, which you can try and tame and mount and use to your advantage. The Sylphi, you can actually use their auras, is what they use. When they come on the game board, their auras will affect the heroes and the enemies. And of course, if you can make them a companion of yours, you get more of an advantage. After mulling it over, I've decided to not take advantage of this event card in terms of the main text. Based on the event card that we pulled, the only thing moving is going to be the Hayati, and it's going to be moving one space towards me. Just like that, we are done resolving the event, and we can move on to the next activation, which is going to be Pyra. Now, looking at what Pyra has available, it's worth noting in terms of a special ability in the top right-hand corner, when Pyra makes an attack, it gains range 1. So she is able to make attacks from distance, which is certainly handy. We have some good cards here in hand, good technique cards. We also have some combos to work towards. And of course, we always want to get that Fury up so we can use that special ability. Now, we do have a creature that's come very, very close to us, and we do still have a tracker in her space. We probably should go ahead and do one of the attack and move combinations like maneuver in order to kill off or attempt to kill off the tracker in her space, and then use the move to maybe get in the space where the creature is, where we can attempt to tame it. So using a maneuver action, we're going to attack first the one tracker in our space. We just need to see one success to get a kill here. Easily gotten. That individual has been killed off. Finishing off that action, we're going to move into the space with the creature, and we are now going to go ahead and attempt to tame it. When attempting to tame a creature, you need to discard a card from your hand that has the same icon that's shown next to the savagery keyword on the creature's card. So in this case, it needs to be a red triangle. I think out of the three, I'm going to let the one in the middle go. Now we do a check to see whether the taming was successful. We need to use the art stat, which is the green one there. So I get 3 white dice. And of course, I could attempt to bolster this if I wanted to. But also worth mentioning that you have to take a look at the savagery keyword on the creature itself, which you just saw moments ago. And next to the red triangle was a 3 in brackets. That's how many successes we need to land or more in order to successfully tame this creature. It's going to be a tougher roll, seeing as we're kind of rolling an even amount here, and I need every one of these to be a success. I do have my reroll if I wanted to burn it on this, but, you know, I don't know how badly I want to mount this creature, but I do want to show you how it works, so we'll see how this roll pans out. Oh, okay, we'll take a 4. I'm all right with that. So that is a definite success. We are going to be mounting the creature. First thing you're going to do is remove your character with a base, and you're going to use the character that doesn't have a base and put it right on top of the mount. As you'll notice, glistening right in the saddle on the creature itself is a magnet, and that's going to keep the miniature in place during gameplay. And just like that, the Pyra has leveled up and now has the creature's abilities at its disposal. The next thing you do is you take the reference card for the creature that you just tamed and mounted, and you're going to flip it over and place the card just above the stats on your character board. When you slot the mount behind your character board, you're going to line it up with the stats. It will easily remind you what things have changed. So how much my unit counts for now has increased to 2. This matters, as I mentioned earlier in the video, around how many units can be in a particular space. The limit is 6. So now 1/3 of the space can be taken up by just me on a mount alone. And then you've got a +1 to movement. So now I'm moving a little bit faster, obviously, now on a mount. But one of the best benefits is I get a free attack with this one of 3, which is awesome to use on my turn. And then above it, it just gives you a reminder of the savagery check, the type of card, and also the value you need to hit to continue to tame the thing. And of course, below it talks about what happens if you don't. So worth mentioning again, just for clarification, when you gain your mount, you don't just have it forever. You're only going to be able to have it for as long as you can keep it under control. So at the beginning of every single activation for this character, we're going to be making a roll to see whether we're able to kind of hold on and keep this creature under our control. If we don't, we lose it. For my final action, I'm going to choose to use this technique card for the middle, which is perfect. It's a leap 2. When you do a leap 2, the combatant is going to perform a leap and they can move up to X amount of spaces, which is 2 in this case, and you get to ignore all the terrain effects like impassable, inaccessible, dangerous. In other words, things like that gigantic rock right there. We are going to literally jump straight over it. We have to go in a straight line though, which is fine. We'll just go 2 spaces south, which will put us 1 away with range from that pile of enemies where we can make an attack because the Pyra has ranged as a special ability. Now here's what's even cooler. The special ability on Pyra states that all of Pyra's attacks gain range 1. That includes the free attack that we get for being on a mount. So I'm going to be getting an attack not only from this technique card, but a free attack thanks to being on a mount as well. That's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to go ahead and roll 3 dice and see how many of these things we can wipe out. Let's roll it off. That is a lot of successes. Wow. So that is going to be a full clearing of that space. And that, my friends, was an incredible roll with incredible results. So we've got ourselves most of this board cleared. But remember, in order to scroll, we need to have everything off of this board, this half of the board. That includes our heroes. So we need to progress to the other side as quick as possible, knowing full well the enemies on that side are going to be a bit tougher. Moving on to the next activation, it's going to be the level 2 specialist first, but the level 2 specialist is actually not in play yet. So the level 2 enemies are going to go, and that is going to be, well, there's an example right there in front of you. That is the Slaughterer. 1 of 2 of them on the game board are now going to activate. We're actually going to be starting with the one in the shot here as it's further north. It's worth mentioning for even further clarification around movement that difficult terrain and dangerous terrain only affect heroes. They do not affect the enemies. So if the enemies move through difficult terrain, which is the white border with the curved edges, or dangerous terrain, which has an icon with some drops, but we haven't seen that yet in play, the enemy will walk straight through those as if there's no problem at all. Now in this case, where I'm about to move the Slaughterers, they're not going to run into those situations anyway, but it's worth mentioning. The one terrain effect that does affect them is going to be giant boulders or impassable areas, and they're identified by not having any border in this space whatsoever, like a good example right here. You can see up top with the Slaughterer that right to the west of it is actually a difficult terrain space. But again, the way the movement works is it's always going to try to move to the closest hero, and when it starts moving, it's going to move diagonally as much as humanly possible until it gets into the same row as the hero, and then it's going to come over. The Slaughterers have 2 movement. I've moved it 1. It needs to move again, but it cannot move diagonal. In this case, it is going to continue to shuffle down, so it's going to move south. And the other Slaughterer was a really easy move, coming straight over, heading west towards Brid. Luckily, neither of them were able to make it into her space, so for these individuals, they're not going to be able to pull off an attack. With the activation phase all done, we now move to the enemy spawn phase. You're reminded of this when your token reaches the end of the track. There's actually a deck of cards with an arrow letting you know to go ahead and draw a spawn card. We're going to do that right now. When resolving a spawn card, it's really straightforward. The left-hand side here has a couple nodes letting you know how much danger is associated with that spawn card. So it gives you a rough idea as to how difficult the card's going to be overall. At the very bottom, it's going to have a highlight either on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. In this case, it's on the right-hand side, which means it is coming in these spawns from the east. And it's also even clearer by taking a look at the arrows in terms of which way they're coming into the card itself. If it happens to be a spawn coming from behind us in the west, the actual arrows will be pointing on the opposite side of the card as well. And there's other ways the game can change this going on. It's worth mentioning that in terms of what's coming in and how much, all those icons will let you know whether it's a regular enemy or a specialist and what level it should be. Now, if there's any levels depicted that currently aren't part of play, like level 3 in this case, you're just not going to spawn for those. So the top one and the bottom one are not going to get anything, but in terms of what's coming from the east towards the west, we are going to have some spawning going on right in the middle. So after spawning in our enemies, this is what it looks like. Again, as you can see on the right-hand side of the spawn card, you've got 4 different things in a row, and that correlates to the 4 different slots they could come in on that side of the game board. Next up, we need to resolve a Sylphi spawn. That's because of the icon of the Sylphi right on the card. It also points to a rune stone, letting you know that's where it's going to spawn. The good thing is we get to choose where the Sylphi is going to go and which rune stone it's going to be on. Again, this will be all based on what actual Sylphi we get. It could be the common one, the uncommon, or the rare. And we have to roll a die to determine which one it will be. Let's go ahead and roll, and it's all broken out right on the card there. It is a 2. It's actually going to be the rare one. And another thing to make note of is this icon right here is the chaos icon. So that means we're going to make a change to the initiative row. So just to resolve that first, we'll go ahead and flip over the border of this row. And this is going to remind us that the entire activation row is going to be reshuffled and replaced out at the beginning of the next round. The Sylphis are all listed right here: common, uncommon, and rare. The rare one is the one we landed, so it's the enchanter on the far right. I now need to decide where this is going to be placed. As you can see in the shot here, we have 2 different runes we could potentially spawn this thing at, and it says right on the card there, Aura 1, combatants suffer -1 to their art. So that is what is going to be inflicted upon anything within the aura of this miniature, depending on where we put it. So if we necessarily don't want it, and we probably don't, anywhere near our mount, I'm probably not going to place it right here right now, as I'm going to be trying to continue to tame and control that thing going forward. So having that thing anywhere near it would be a negative for me. So I'm going to place it up at the other rune. Just like that, we're all done, and we'll take the reference card for this thing, keep it within easy reach. We may want to make this thing a companion in the future. The last thing to do inside of the spawn phase is check around on any reference cards or anywhere else that might relate to the spawn phase. We have one here with the hunter that says, while the hunter is on the board, spawn a tracker at the end of each spawn phase in any space along the east edge. So just when you thought you'd seen the worst, a little bit more is coming at you. That's going to wrap up the spawn phase. Now let's talk about the end of round. It's really simple. You're going to check for any end of round effects. I don't currently have any, but the one thing you do need to check is a defeat condition. If the event deck is empty, you lose the game right here. We now begin a brand new round, starting with the hero preparation phase, and of course the first thing we need to do is to make sure we have our hand limit of 6 cards in hand. We currently only have 1 card remaining in hand at the moment, and as for the Pyra, I do at this point with the remaining 5 cards I'm going to draw up, get a choice as to which deck I'm pulling them from. For now, I think I'll keep it even because both heroes are relatively close to each other, and my strategy is to really get into the center area of the board. As you can see, it's gotten really cluttered there, and to help each other kind of work through it. So I'll probably grab 2 cards for the Pyra and 3 for Brid. So just like that, we now have our hand of 6. You can take a look at it from a top-down view, and of course we'll be using these cards during the upcoming round, so you'll see them in action. We move into the initiative phase, and at this point we take a look at the border on the far left-hand side. It is a chaos token, which lets us know we need to do a chaos check. How you resolve that check is you essentially flip that border over, which we'll do in a second, and we'll place the activation token below it just on top, and then we're going to take all the cards in the row, we're going to shuffle them face down, and then redistribute them across the row in a random order that is unknown to us. So this is going to change things up for the upcoming round. Well, my friends, that was a very aggressive change. We have the level 1 enemies initiating first, then level 2, and then our heroes get to go. We might be in a bit of trouble coming up. Now, one way to mitigate this situation during the initiative phase, if you have a leader token, which is this token right here, and none of my heroes have it yet, but if one of them did, they could then use it in order to change positions of themselves with anything else in the row. So they might swap positions with the level 1 enemies to get them at the very front, which could change up the tactics of the upcoming round. So getting that leader token is definitely strategic and useful, especially when that chaos check happens in the initiative phase, when it does. Now, it's not going to always happen, so that's something to remember too. So we're going to start things off with the Hunter here, as this Specialist activates first when this card activates, and the Specialist Hunter is going to move diagonally at this point to try to get into the row where the nearest hero is. So again, based on the nearest hero, which obviously is this one, it's going to try to get itself in the row associated to that hero, and then it's going to try to start moving towards it. It only moves 1 at a time right now, so that's good. He's slowly making his way over. At this point, all the trackers are going to move, and they're going to initiate one by one, just like I showed you in an earlier portion of the video. This is how things look now. We do have 2 of the trackers in the same space as Brid, so we're going to be under an attack, coming with 2 damage plus an additional 1 from the pack 1 effect, so 3. Brid has some defending to do. Just like that, Fury has been increased, card has been tucked under the dashboard, and we're going to grab 5 dice and roll them off to see how well we do in defense against the 3 attack damage coming our way here. Let's see how we do. Yes, that'll work. And now we move along to the next activation on the track, which is the level 2 enemies, so the Slaughterers are going to activate next. The Slaughterers have 2 movement, so both of them that are close by to Brid are going to easily be able to make it into her, being the closest hero. The 2 at the very far back, I'll have to do some counting to see if they're equal distance, but either way, they're not going to be able to make it and do an attack, but they will move as far forward as they possibly can. The Slaughterers are bearing down on our heroes, and Brid has another defensive roll to make, and the other Slaughterers at the back have made their way forward as well. It's a good thing that I kept that ironclad defense for a situation like this, and now what's really nasty is on the Slaughterer's card, their attack value is 3, so you might think that you're taking 3 and then adding another 3 for 6. The rules state that we have identical miniatures in the space, any additional identical miniatures only count for 1. So even though the Slaughterer's physical attack or regular attack is 3, it's not going to stack 3 and then 3, it's going to stack 3 plus 1. So it's going to be 4 coming at us, which is still substantial because we're only rolling 4 defensive dice. We still need a good roll, but I do have the ironclad defense in my back pocket if I really, really need it. So here we go. Let's see how this pans out. Hopefully we don't take too much of a hit, but these guys are not easy. Oh my gosh, that was an amazing roll. Wow, that's really, really good. And I believe that only one side of the die, has the 2 pips, so that's pretty impressive. Blocking absolutely everything. Brid, well, she's a tank. Pyra is next to activate, have lots going on here. Nothing is currently prepared around combos yet, but we could work towards that if we wish. Here are the cards that she has available to her, and I also am on a mount with her, so we've got options. The interesting thing around strategy here is I want to take down as many enemies as possible, and I'm also looking at a card in my hand that gives me the potential, if I can kill off an enemy, to gain the leader token, which would really help me out in those situations like what just happened in this current round where all the enemies get to go first. Having the leader token would be useful. Now, the downside of this is if I want to stay on my mount, I have to make a check right now, and I have to discard one of the red triangle cards, and I only have 1, and it would be the one I want to actually use as a technique card. So if I want to go ahead and continue to stay on the mount, I have to discard a card that equals the same symbol plus make the roll on art and have it be 3 or higher. Otherwise, I get hit from the actual Hayate for 1 point, and I have to remove the Hayate from the game board. Whereas if I choose right now to dismount, I don't even have to do the check, and I can keep this card. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose to release the creature. We're going to take the reference card off of Pyra, and we're also going to jump off the mount. And at this point, we have our 3 basic actions we can use. Of course, in any free actions, let's go ahead and do some attacks. All right, we're going to go ahead and use a sequence card here to make 2 back-to-back attacks. If any of the attacks eliminate 1 or more enemies, I become the leader. Pyra does, I should say, which is awesome. That'll give us some control over the initiative row. So let's go ahead and roll these dice for this first attack. Actually, I'm rolling 4 dice. I should be rolling just 3 because that's all Pyra has for an attack. Again, doing it from range, as she always gets the bonus of having a +1 on range. So here we go. Nice, 4 hits. Wow, the dice are with me today. Okay, so from that, 2 will kill off the Slaughterer as it's a defense value of 2, and maybe I will pick, well, I guess I could kill off both of the Slaughterers. Let's do that. After resolving that attack, I also get the leader token, which I'll place on Pyra's board. Let's go ahead and make another attack here, hoping for good things. Oh my gosh, killer rolls right now. Performing that technique as my first action was really, really beneficial. As you can see, jumping off the mount there was the right thing to do. We were able to wipe out that entire group with the attacks I had there of those 2 on the card, plus be able to gain the leader token. So that obviously ended up being the right call. And I've still got 2 cards in hand up here. I get at this point to gain the Fury on this card. So we're going to jump up by 1, and we can also choose to tuck this under to perform a combo. And the great thing about it is it's a red triangle, which is the beginning piece of any of the combos I have. All right, that was just 1 basic action. Let's go ahead with our second next. At this point, I think I'm going to target the Hunter. So I'm going to do my maneuver action right now, which will allow me to move, and I'm going to stay just 1 space away from that giant pile of enemies. Pyra is ready to focus her attack of the end of her maneuver action on the hunter. I want to take that hunter out before it has the chance to have more spawns come in, and on top of it, it has a pretty nasty attack at 4, which is insane. The defensive value for it is 3, so I should likely be able to pull this off. Pyra's regular attack is a 3, so we're going to go ahead and finish off the maneuver basic action to do an attack here using 3 dice, but in order to bolster things, if an ally is in the same space or an adjacent space, they can discard a card, and as long as it matches the same stat that you're actually trying to roll, which is in this case the attack +1, I'm going to be able to add an additional die to the roll. I can only do this once, however. You can't just stack this endlessly. So this is a nice little helping hand to hopefully get me over the hump of the 3 defense that the hunter has. Hopefully, and again, I can disperse these hits however I want depending on how I roll. If I don't get enough, I can put them all over the trackers instead to take them out if I don't get up to 3. But here's hoping I get the 3. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely got the 3. That's 7. Pyra's attack was absolutely devastating, wiping out everyone in that space, and on the hunter's card, it tells us, the reference card, that a loot card is gained, so Pyra's going to gain that. Of course, Pyra also gains the leader token, but already has it, so we just ignore that. And I got myself some ranged weapons. I have a ranged attack 1. You'll see some tracker tokens, which I'm now going to place on the card. It'll go into Pyra's inventory, letting me know I can use this thing 3 times. Not bad at all. Was able to take out the whole area and gain something really cool to use later on. Next up, I'm going to choose to prepare a combo. The reason I want to do this is because, as you'll see, if I put a blue icon down here, I'll have the red triangle, the blue square, which charges up the blinding arrows. And as you can see at the bottom, it says, while this combo is charged, and charge is a keyword when you have 2 cards in the row that are in the sequence of the combo itself, then Pyra's going to gain a +1 on shields going forward. So it'll bump up her overall stat to 3, which will help her out. And just like that, Pyra's all squared away. That was 3 basic actions. And we can move on to the next activation, which is Brid. Brid is going to go ahead and do a maneuver action, which will allow her to move and attack if she wants, or attack and move, or just attack. In this case, just moving is all I'm going to do because my attack for her is within the current space when I do a maneuver, the regular attack. So she's just going to move forward 2 spaces, sit still. We're going to use then a technique card as a second basic action to initiate a ranged attack. Brid's maneuver action is now done. Second action, playing this technique card for a range 1 attack, which is perfect against these 2 slaughterers. It says I can stun one of the specialists, there is none in the space, or 2 of these individuals in the targeted space. Pretty awesome. So let's make that attack right now. Now, Brid doesn't have a really powerful attack, just 2 dice. We're going to go ahead and roll. Probably not going to be taking out many of these guys. Maybe just 1 if we get lucky here. Okay, yep, just 1. And the other 1 damage that we got just kind of disappears. But at least 1 is better than nothing. What's even better about this attack is the stun gets to hit the one I didn't kill. The stun knocks it over on its side, which means when it activates the next turn, it'll simply just stand up, and that's all it gets to do. The technique card I use does have a Fury icon on it, so I do get to bump up my Fury to 4, working my way up to the very top. I can choose to go ahead and place it in the row below if I want to. I can always discard a card out of here if I don't want it in there. Right now, not really worried about getting this card in the row anyway, so I'll just put it in the regular discard. For my third basic action, I'm going to do a heal here. Now, when you do a heal, there's 2 different ways you can heal. One is to take a look at the pips next to the number along the chart here, and wherever you're at. That pip, if it's single, lets you know that you're unharmed. If it's 2 pips, it's you're weak, and 3 pips is critical. Now, those pips matter because it lets you know how many dice you need to roll if you're trying to heal up your track. So in this case, I'd only get 1 die based on the 1 pip. I'd roll it, and based on the number of successes, I would move up the health track. That's one way to use the heal. The other way is to just simply discard a severe injury card, which you knew from the very beginning of the video is pretty nasty, as it would sit on the side here, out of your hand when playing the solo mode, but impacting your hand limit and also how many cards you can draw up from that particular hero. So we'll roll the die here, seeing if I can bump up my health, and I do. A single one will jump me up to 7. Looking at the initiative track, the next one in line is an event card pull. This event card is called Fatigue. It says all heroes are going to lose a Fury point. That is definitely not good. And then the creatures and Sylphi are going to move left. For the Fury point loss, we're going to be dropping Brid from 4 to 3 and Pyra from 1 to 0. That's going to wrap up the event and the activation phase. We now move into the spawn phase. This time around, we have a really active spawn card. You'll see from the east, we're going to have a whole bunch of units coming in, as we definitely have level 1s and 2s across the board dropping in real soon. We also have a spawn of a creature going on, so it's going to be on the left board, which is this board we're currently pointing at right now, and actually the position it will spawn, it's right here. Again, it depends on whether it's a common, uncommon, or rare. You'll know which of those it is based on the adventure sheet for the adventure that you're playing. In this case, the Hayate, which is already out, which is one of the 3 creatures we have, is in the uncommon position. So if we happen to roll that, well, it's already on the game board, we just skip it. If it happens to be the common or rare, we may have a new creature coming in. Let's go ahead and roll and find out how this goes. I rolled completely backwards and off the game board. I got a common result. I believe that is the horse. So as you can tell, the world is very active. There's creatures coming in and out of the game board, and there's times when the creatures will actually leave. Like, for instance, if I had failed any kind of tame check on the Hayate, it would have been discarded and would have left play. So these creatures can pop in and out of play at different times throughout your game. At this point, we have a whole bunch of enemies coming in on the east side of the game board. Reinforcements have most certainly arrived. At the end of the spawn phase, we check to see if the hunter's in play. It is not. It was taken out, and because of that, no additional spawning of any more trackers is going to happen, which was all part of my strategy in taking it out as quickly as I could. All right, currently for my 2 heroes, I've got 1 card in hand for the Pyra. I'm going to choose to keep things even. We're going to draw up 3 for Brid and 2 for Pyra, so 3 apiece. With that all squared away, we can move to the initiative phase. Now this time around, there was no chaos token on the spawn card, so everything's going to remain the same for the initiative track, but I do have a leader token on Pyra. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to swap positions with Pyra with one of the enemy activation cards in order to get Pyra a little bit further ahead in the initiative order for the upcoming round. So Pyra's gone ahead and changes places with one of the other activation cards and chose to change places with the level 1 activation card of the enemies. The first action I'm going to take on Pyra's turn is to maneuver. We're going to move and make a ranged attack. Now when we move, you're going to notice we're going to cross over a threshold, the middle of the game board, which means no combatants will be on the left-hand side of the game board anymore. There'll be no enemies over there and no heroes. The creatures and anything else over there does not count as a combatant, so that means we begin to scroll the board. That's going to take place the moment we cross over here and wrap up this basic action. Now, what's kind of comical about this 2 move that I just did with Pyra is that the only individual that's close enough to be shot at right now is the one that's stunned. So let's go ahead and make a shot at it and see if we can take it out. So 3 dice, and we're just looking for 2 damage. Come on, let's make this happen. Yes, we got what we needed. That downed or stunned slaughterer has been killed off. So at this point, we're now going to move into scrolling. We're going to take the left-hand board and completely remove it from play, take the right-hand board and shift it over to the left, and then we're going to bring in another board as part of the adventure. So scrolling really lets you see how this game opens up and throws surprises at you as you continue to move through quests within an adventure. You remember in the narrative at the beginning of the video, it talked about nomad huts in the distance. Well, now we can actually see them. Now, taking a quick look at the Quest 1 ambush, we have succeeded not only in the secondary objective, but also the primary objective, heading east and scrolling the board. We're now going to flip this over to determine what else happens in this quest. Approaching the tents, you soon see that the Kazuls have lived up to their reputation. The camp has been devastated. Mutilated bodies bear the signs of savage violence, and some appear to have been tortured. As you survey the carnage, you hear the distant howls of a pack of Hayates running in your direction. You'll see on the back of quest number 1 the narrative, which I just read out, and also a whole bunch of instructions around how to implement the changes going into quest 2. Now let me walk you through everything that's just changed. The first thing it says to place objective tokens in each space with rotating arrows, which are the 2 huts you can see here in the picture. It now mentions that for the spawn deck, depending on whether you're playing with 2 or 3 heroes or 4 heroes, you're going to put a specific card on top of the deck. The one thing I need to mention here is I made a mistake and actually had that card part of the spawn deck from the beginning of this video, and it actually was one of the ones I pulled, so all I did was take it from the discard and just put it back on top. Be careful of that, and it was most likely the one that had the level 3 enemies. Remember that? You're not going to see spawn cards for level 3 enemies when they're not currently in play, but as you can just see on the right hand side, some level 3 enemies are coming into play now, which is why that new spawn card is dropping on top. That new enemy is listed out in its own reference card. It shows level 3, and it is called the Flare enemy. I've also gone ahead and placed all the miniatures for that particular unit type near and within easy reach. There's 4 of them total. The next change for the quest card is to take the end border for the initiative row, move it over to the east a little bit further so you can make room for the level 3 card that is now at the very end, and you're going to spawn a level 1 specialist in the most northern hut, which you can see it is the Hunter. Now you'll remember we took the Hunter out as a secondary objective, and this is where the game is really cool, is that it remembers what you've done and accomplished. Because we completed that secondary objective, this Hunter will not come in with the 2 bonuses you can see there that would have been bonuses, one-time usages for the Hunter to take advantage of if it hadn't been killed. So if we had left it alone and not completed that secondary objective, the Hunter would have been that much tougher to defeat. But he was defeated, so he's coming in as just a regular Hunter. Quite happy about this. So at this point, we are now done. We're going to discard quest number 1, and quest card 2, A Ghastly Sight, now takes precedence. And that, my friends, is going to be a perfect spot to wrap up part number 1 as we completed quest 1. In the next video, we're going to go through quest number 2, and then we'll move into the finale for quest number 3. Now, just to remind you, in terms of where we're at gameplay-wise, we had just started a brand new round. Pyra's turn is currently in progress, and I'd only done one thing, which is essentially just a maneuver, and that caused the whole scrolling. So when we come back in the next video, we'll be continuing Pyra's turn. If anyone has any thoughts around strategy as to what to do first, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear your thoughts. Hopefully this is giving you a great idea as to what this game has to offer you. And remember, this is a prototype and also one of the introductory adventures in the game, so this game will continue to layer on things as you progress. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.